Nothing makes a house feel like a home as much as unique and original artwork. It's even better if it's homemade. Hi, I'm Michaela. In this video, I will demonstrate how you can make your very own cozy city collage. Follow these 10 easy steps to create a picture that will brighten your home and celebrate your favorite place. The first step to this project is to go outside and get inspired. Take a walk around your hometown and see what makes your city unique. Try to look at your surroundings with fresh eyes. Pretend you're a tourist. What are some of the features that stand out? For me, in Braga, Portugal, some of the most notable features include the tiled buildings, the calçada portuguesa, which is the traditional Portuguese pavement, the orange trees, the balconies, and the potted plants. I also noticed little things like the shape of the windows, the color of the roof tiles, and the numbers above the doors. Other fun features include post boxes, storefront names, outdoor seating for cafes, and even graffiti. There are no wrong answers here. All you have to do is look. Find the features that make you feel cozy and at home. Once you have an idea of what you want to create, the next step is to gather your materials. Some important collage tools include scissors, a paper cutter, a hole puncher, a ruler with shape stencils, fine tip pens, masking tape, and of course glue. My favorite glue to use is Mod Podge because it both sticks and seals, and it dries clear. Since it's water-based, it's also easy to clean up if you spill. I use paint brushes to apply the Mod Podge to my collages, a smaller brush to glue down paper pieces, and a bigger brush to seal the collage at the end. When it comes to your collage materials, the world is your oyster. Colored construction paper provides a great base stock, but don't be afraid to add other interesting papers and textures. I like to use wallpaper samples, for example, wrapping paper, and even patterned napkins. I also love to find interesting patterns on food packaging, catalogs, flyers, and even junk mail. You can also find fun details like numbers for your houses, country flags, and maybe even little pictures of animals and birds just by keeping an eye out. Whenever you see something you think you might like for your collage, cut it out and save it. The next step to your collage building project is to make some assets. It's time to translate your inspiration into paper form. The important thing here is to think about shapes and textures. What are the key features, the building blocks that you want to include in your collage? For me, let's start with the orange trees. I love how cheerful they look with their bounty of bright fruit, especially in the winter months. To replicate their lush foliage, I take some basic colored construction paper and I start drawing leaves using a fine tip pen. Now, these leaves don't have to be perfect. I just want to create the impression of leaves, and I can do that in a couple of different ways. I can draw little circles, or I can scribble some fun spirals, or I can draw some pointed leaf shapes. By changing the color of the paper or the color of the pen I use, I can get lots of fun variety. Once I'm satisfied with my patterns, I cut the paper into tree shapes. Then, to make the oranges, I simply pop out some orange circles with my hole puncher and glue them down. And there you have it, orange trees. Next on my asset list are the buildings themselves. One of the really beautiful features of where I live in Braga is all the lovely tile work on the buildings. To replicate this in my collages, I look for some pretty patterned paper. The building shapes themselves are fairly basic. A rectangle does the job just fine, but if I want to add some variety, I can also create some with triangular tops. If I think back to my inspiration walk, I remember that the buildings are not all the same height or width, so I can have fun making buildings of different sizes and shapes for my collage. For the roofs, I use a variety of different papers, some textured like corrugated cardboard, others patterned, and some that I'll just draw on tiles myself. I like to keep my roof papers in the red, orange, brown color range to replicate what I see in the city. The trick is to measure your roof pieces to match the width of the buildings that you cut out. Once you do that, you're good to go. Other assets for my Braga City collages include windows, doors, flower pots, mailboxes, balconies, and pavement tiles. I like to have these cut out and ready to go so that I can easily add them to my collage once I start gluing. So, take a look around. What assets will you make for your collage? Once you have your assets ready, the next step is to work out a basic composition for your collage. Where do you want all the big pieces to go? And how will you arrange them to be visually pleasing? For this part, I recommend working from the back forward. First of all, you need a base for your collage. I start with the sky. Now, it's important here to get your size right. How big do you want the final project to be? It's helpful here to think about ease of framing. What size collage will fit into a pre-cut mat? For this project, I'm aiming to use an 18 by 24 centimeter frame with a mat opening of 12 by 17 centimeters. So I'll need my base layer to be 13 by 18 centimeters, which gives me a little wiggle room for when I fit it into the mat. Once I have my base layer prepared, I can start adding my main assets, starting with my trees, which are the items furthest in the background. Next come the buildings, and here I'll want to play around a bit with size and color. I don't want all my buildings to be the same height, so I'll choose some taller ones and some shorter ones. I also want to consider which colors go well together. I could choose to have a more monochromatic look with different shades of blue, for example, or I could go with contrasting, complementary colors. Have fun with it! This is the part where you really start seeing your design come together. I also like to lay out a base layer for my pavement in this step, since it helps me to visualize the final product and how the buildings line up together. I recommend that you do this before you start adding details like windows and doors, since this will also help you to create clear lines for where to place everything. If you're satisfied with your composition, it's time to start gluing. Begin with the items furthest in the background and work your way forward. I'll start with my trees and then add my building shapes on top, making sure that they line up without any gaps. Then I add my roofs, keeping in mind how this impacts the view of the trees. Finally, I glue down my pavement base. And now I have a pretty good sense of what the collage will look like. With the base layer complete, it's time to add some details that will really bring the collage to life. I'm talking windows, doors, and pavement tiles. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is the most time-consuming part of the project. Gluing down all those little window panes and pavers is kind of a pain, but it'll be worth it in the end. It's what makes your collage really intricate and beautiful. For the windows, I start with stone frames of different shapes and styles. I usually pick one window shape per building so that each building has its own consistent style. I lay out all the frames for that building before I start gluing, just to make sure that the spacing looks good. I try to make sure that the windows are aligned with each other and that the door frames are a realistic distance from the ground. Once I'm satisfied with the layout, I start gluing. And once those outer frames are in place, I can start adding doors and inner frames for the windows. Sometimes I like to add a double frame to the window, just to add a pop of color to my design. But really, it's up to you. You can make your windows and doors as simple or as complicated as you like. With the frames in place, it's time to add the window panes. To make these, I cut out long, thin strips of black paper, and then do my best to cut out panes of similar size. Now keep in mind that it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of the charm of collages comes from their small imperfections, those little details that show that this is a homemade work of art. With my little window panes cut out, I start gluing. And here it's helpful to use a small paintbrush for your glue. This helps you to pick up the tiny window panes and put them in place. If necessary, though, you could also use a pair of tweezers. Putting down the pavement tiles involves a similar process. The nice thing about these tiles is that they don't all have to be the same size. You do need to align them, though, so that there aren't huge gaps between the tiles. This takes a bit of time, but it will create a really nice effect at the end. Yay, you're almost finished! By this point, the collage is looking pretty good. There are trees and buildings and roofs and windows and doors and a lovely pavement. To really make the design pop, though, it's nice to add in some fun details. This is my favorite part of the process. It's in this step that you can really draw from your inspiration walk and tell a story about your city through your artwork. Some of the details that I like to include in my collages are balconies, flower pots, flags, and door numbers. Sometimes I'll also add in the name of a shop or a cafe. I can also make tiny tables and chairs for my cafe customers. Have fun with this part. There really aren't any rules here. Just tell the story you want to tell and make the design your own. By this point, the collage is pretty much done. But if you like, you can still add in a few details using a fine tip pen. For example, I like to outline some of my buildings using a ruler, just to give them a bit more definition. I also outline my flower pots and I add some details to my stonework, especially on the window and door frames. If you're feeling especially brave, you can also add some city graffiti, drawing from real life. On my inspiration walks, I like to look and see what people are writing on walls, and if I find it amusing or interesting, I just might incorporate it into my collage. My big tip here is just to make sure that you use a pen that is waterproof. You don't want your work to smear when you add the final water based sealant. Also, give the penwork a chance to dry properly before you apply that final seal. I learned this the hard way, so don't make the same mistake. With everything dry and in place, it's time to seal your work. I like to use Mod Podge for this step since it dries nice and clear with a nice clean finish. The advantage of sealing your work is that it helps to keep everything in place while also providing some protection against color fading. The trick to sealing is not to use too much glue on your brush. You just want to apply a thin layer. I like to do this in vertical strips, working from right to left. That way, I make sure that everything gets covered without missing spots as the Mod Podge dries. Be careful here on your base layer, in my case, the sky, since if you apply too much sealant, the paper can warp a little bit with the moisture. If you keep your layer thin, though, you'll be fine. Once the sealant is dry, you're ready to frame your artwork. It's so nice to see it all come together. To frame your artwork, take the mat out of the frame and place it over your collage. Have a look here at alignment. Is your pavement straight compared to the mat? If you're happy, tape the corners of your collage to the back of the mat and check again. If you're sure that everything is properly aligned, you can add some more masking tape to the sides of the collage to make sure that it all stays in place. Then return the mat to the frame, close it up, and voila, you're finished. So there you have it. In just 10 steps, you can create your very own cozy city collage. One of the nice things about this design is that it's easy to scale up or down, so you can make a collage to fit any space. So, what are you waiting for? Go ahead, get inspired, and start designing.